Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Great.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome in. This is FST, Fantasy Sports Today. My name is Matt Stryker. His name is Joe Pisapia. Derrick Brown is coming along in just a few short moments. We are wall-to-wall fallout from the NFL draft. Everything you need is right here in order to dominate, and the time to start is now. At SportsGrid, at SportsGrid TV. Those are our social media handles. Make sure you give us a follow. A lot of this information is going to get buried and lost, and you don't want that to happen. Joe Pisapia is the author of the Fantasy Black Book series. Derrick Brown will be along shortly, one of the most insightful people in the industry. Joe, what a wild draft. First and foremost, you were there. You covered it. Hands-on. What was it like? Thank you for your coverage, and what were your takeaways?
Yeah, 10 hours, back-to-back nights. Well, 10 and a half, but who's counting, of live broadcasting for me at Fantasy Pros of the draft. Hundreds of thousands of people in the streets of Detroit. Pretty stunning. I can't believe I still have a voice, to be honest with you. It's barely hanging on by a thread. And I have to coach football today myself. So I'm sure by tonight I'm going to have nothing, just nothing left. Because you know me, I get on that football field and I start yelling and screaming. So I can't help it. I'm like
Campbell,
the Pete Carroll of flag football for youth flag football. I'm very excitable. But it was a fun draft. The first round started off very chalk. And then all of a sudden, chaos ensued, which is great because you want that. It's good television. I know here on the network too, Ben Stevens and everybody did just a phenomenal job of taking people through. We have a great college football crew here on SportsGrid, so hopefully you're watching there as well. But the elements of surprise were there, some elements of shock. Once again, I think the storylines coming out of this is obviously it was a very quarterback-heavy draft. At some point, I remember saying to my colleagues, I said, we haven't had a defensive player come off the board. I don't ever remember this many. And it was about 12 picks in. I said, wow, it's all in offense. I ended up getting 14 offensive players going off the board before a defensive player. That's twice the record to open a draft. 7 was the original high. But it was a quarterback bonanza. 5 quarterbacks in the first 12 picks. We knew 3 were going to go. It's the other 2 that we did not think were going to be that. So obviously, Caleb Williams was that first guy off the board there for the Chicago Bears, the quarterback of the future. No Bears quarterback has thrown for 40,000 yards and 30 touchdowns in a season. Can Caleb Williams be that guy? They drafted Rome Odunze. We'll get more about the Bears draft in a second here. But they also already have Keenan Allen. And they already have DJ Moore. They've got a lot of pieces here around him where he can be immediately successful with 2 very, very strong veteran presence guys at wide receiver. You have some running backs around him. You have enough to surround him. It's just going to be a matter of how does Caleb Williams take to Chicago? It's a tough market. This is not Southern California. You and I know this. When you go to certain towns and certain cities, it's going to be a little bit edgier than some other spots. So you got to be mentally prepared for that. All the talent in the world is great, but you need the right coaching in football. You need the right environment in football, and you need the right personality for the right place you are. Jaden Daniels was the second quarterback to go off the board to the Washington Commanders. Now, Jaden Daniels is a guy that I think you should be very excited about in fantasy because as long as he stays healthy, he's a guy that uses his legs. He's going to get you rushing equity. Yeah. He did have 2 great wide receivers at LSU. So did Joe Burrow. People were questioning, is Joe Burrow really this good? He's throwing to Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. I think I could throw to those guys and look pretty decent. Uh-huh. But Jaden Daniels did have 2 all-star wide receivers to play with. He ends up in a situation here with the Commanders where you do have Terry McLaurin. You do have Austin Eckler now. You have a new look, a new coach. I think Dan Quinn, second time around, is going to be a really good football coach in the NFL, head coach. He's always been a good football guy. Sometimes that second go around for guys is really what clicks for them in the NFL, and I'm glad Dan Quinn is getting that because I think he deserves it. And then, of course, Drake May, the third guy going off the board, too, to the New England Patriots. Now, May is that prototypical size guy. I like the demeanor of Drake May. He's got a little bit of a, I don't know if you want to call it country swagger about him, but he's got that. And I think you're going to need that in New England. The good thing about Drake May is he's not following Tom Brady. There's already been Cam Newton. There's already
point.
been Mac Jones. There's already been Bailey Zappi more than, we'd like to maybe admit. Drake May kind of has a fresh slate here with the new coaching staff. So these 3 guys were the right 3 guys to go off the board. It all made sense. And then it didn't make sense because then you had Michael Penix, who I like a lot. But Michael Penix going to the Falcons was very surprising because and I get it. I get the concept, Matt, which is we take Penix now. We have the quarterback of the present with Cousins coming off a Achilles tendon injury, and the future there is going to be Penix in 3 years. Still, it's a lot of draft capital to use that early. But regardless, Penix certainly does have a big arm.
Well,
he's also got
let me jump in here.
Throws.
Who should Atlanta have taken there?
For me, if you're Atlanta, I would have taken Quinion Mitchell, the cornerback. I think they could use some help there. Or maybe you take a defensive tackle. Maybe you take an edge rusher. You take something on the defensive side of the football or even an offensive lineman, because if you did just make this big investment in Kirk Cousins, don't you want to protect it? Look, the offensive line's pretty good there in Atlanta. Atlanta's a team last year, Matt. If Atlanta had anything resembling just average quarterback play, they would have been a playoff team. Same thing with the Jets.
And some coaching stuff too, but I hear you.
Well, but the coaching stuff was more frustrating than anything. But I think the coaching stuff came from the lack of confidence in the quarterback. So I don't know if I want to hang it all on Arthur Smith. I'll hang most of it on him, but I'm going to hang it also with the quarterback play too. And then Bo Nix, again, a guy that I don't think is a first-round grade quarterback. He's landing with Sean Payton. It's a great opportunity. But at the same time, Matt, Bo Nix is a guy who probably goes in the second round. As good as he was for Oregon last year, I can't erase all of the few years that I saw him playing quarterback in the SEC at Auburn where it was not good. And you drop him in Oregon in an easier conference with a giant offensive line and a lot of weapons. Yeah, it looks a little better. Yeah, there's a lot of dump off. So my partner, Thor Nystrom, who is the best college football analyst out there on the planet, he said, it's easy to have a good completion percentage and all those numbers look good. It's like saying a guy who does nothing but, dunk or layup, and you somehow compare him as a shooter or shooting percentage to Steph Curry. It's not the same thing. So Bo Nix has a lot of work to do. Those were 2 very big surprises, but the Penix one, I get. The Bo Nix one to me is a little bit different for me, but I get it. Like Denver needs a quarterback. Sean Payton is older. He wants to get in there and just get his guy. He did that. Yeah. I just don't know if it was the right call. I think they could have traded back and still gotten him, and I think that's what's more frustrating than anything.
So speaking of some of these twists that happened in round 1, there was a lot of transactions, a lot of picks going to and fro, but no players per se. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's the weird thing. The twist was, those 2 quarterbacks going early. No Brandon Ayuk, no Deebo Samuel trade, no T. Higgins trade. We heard a lot of buzz about that. None of that happened. So none of those big pieces moving we anticipated possibly being on, night 1 or night 2 of the draft. It didn't happen. Now, apparently they were looking for a mid-first rounder for Brandon Ayuk. So I don't know what kind of drugs John Lynch has gotten into, but that's not going to happen.
Francisco,
not in this range
on the streets.
Look, that is true. But at the same point, like if that was your asking price, you're absurd. With the way wide receivers are getting paid right now and the class that you had, there was no way they were going to pull that trade off. They'd be lucky if they got a second-round pick for him. But yeah, that was a little surprising too that somebody didn't get a deal done. But we'll see. There's still time out there for trades to get made, and looks so far that San Francisco is going to have a very full wide receiver room because they drafted some too.
All right, well, let's head down south from San Francisco to San Diego. Well, the Chargers, LA. Sorry, I'm old school. Dan Fouts is still their quarterback in my mind.
Yeah,
but some moves were made.
Yeah, it's taken a long time to not say San Diego. I don't blame you. But yeah, the Chargers, I think, did a great job. They took their offensive lineman of the future, Joe Alt, again, NFL bloodlines there. You love that. They got in the second round the other pieces I think that they really needed to be successful. What I like most about this is they hit all the major points that they needed. You get Ladd McConkey too, who I think is a great fit for Justin Herbert. He is going to be a great fantasy wide receiver in my opinion. So the Chargers, I think, took their draft capital, used it to the best of their abilities. It's not going to show up all of it at once this year, but over the next 2 or 3 years, I think you're going to look back on the draft and say, yep, the Chargers righted the ship here in 2024, and Harbaugh is back, baby. We come back, we'll be right around the corner with more football.
So I turned it off. I got my sweat done, and I'm leaving. I'm taking my money. I'm going home, and I don't want to talk to you the rest.
Oh, yes!
There it is.
6-3. Catch the over. The over is hit. The Padres are our heroes.
That's how we end the show. That's how we end the show.
Oh, well, let's just sign off. Let's just call it a show.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid.
Quotes coming out about Embiid. Oh, he's a warrior. You'll never get him off the court. You're just telling me he's an injury. He's one slip and fall away from not seeing him anymore in this series.
I would have sat him because there was only 1 day between the two games. It's 2 days between games 2 and games 3, and it's 2 days between games 3 and game 4.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Great.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports. Today, we are now known as Hobnobbing with the Suits. That's what our producer has now told us because we are the upper echelon, evidently. I guess the echelon's bar is not high. It is time now to assess the winners of the NFL draft. And I'm excited to hear from you, Joe, because finding and identifying the winners and the players and the why is really going to help me come draft time, come waiver wire. So this conversation is really important. The floor is yours, sir.
Mention talking about the Chargers draft. So I love taking Joe Alt. And I don't think anybody's surprised that that's what happened because Harbaugh went out there and he was talking about how important it is to get that big tackle and you have that guy and it's the most important thing. He's already got the quarterback. He's walking into a situation that's very different than a lot of other head coaches. How many head coaches are walking into a place new where they have a franchise QB? Not many. Usually that's why they're firing coaches, because you don't have a franchise QB. So not only will he get to make the most out of Herbert, but if Herbert for some reason regresses or doesn't work out, Harbaugh's going to get a second shot to pick his own. We all know that's going to happen. So he's not going anywhere. But Joe Alt was a great pick. I mentioned earlier about Ladd McConkey. I love him out of Georgia. I think he is going to be a spectacular fit. I think he's going to be a huge value in dynasty rookie drafts this year. And Junior Colson in the third round, too, the linebacker from Michigan, too, bringing in not just a really good linebacker, but also a guy that he's comfortable with, that he coached, that he knows the leadership quality of, and put him in the middle of the field. That's like another coach on the field. And I know he's going to be a rookie, but still, like, when you start bringing in your guys like that you trust with your systems, it's very important. So I think the Chargers, going from Brandon Staley to Jim Harbaugh is going to be a huge culture shock for that team in the best possible way. But it's hard not to also look at the Bears as a winner. The Bears tried a couple years ago with Justin Fields. It's not all Justin Fields' fault. I want to hug him like Robin Williams did to Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting and just tell him over and over again it's not his fault, because it wasn't. Bad systems, bad offensive line play, not enough weapons around him, but Williams is going to have weapons around him. Rome Odunze is one of them, which is really interesting that they went that route. They could have taken another offensive tackle. They could have gone to the defensive side of the football if they wanted to. Instead, they drafted Rome Odunze because Keenan Allen is probably on his twilight years of his career. But Odunze is another one of these wide receivers out of Washington here, which is going to make an impact. In year one, it's going to be tricky. I would hearken it to last year when you had Jackson Smith and Jigba show up, and everybody was super excited about him, except for the fact that DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett were there. And unfortunately, he was the third banana, and that's probably going to be Rome Odunze at the best, especially with a rookie quarterback. So not the best scenario for him right away, but in terms of long-term, very good. Kieran Amagaji, also the offensive lineman from Yale, was a good selection for them too. A little raw, but again, as all the measurables that you're looking for when it comes to the offensive line spot. So the Bears were a big winner for me. Obviously, you get the number one pick. You don't want to miss. But fun fact, since 1983, Matt, only 5 Hall of Famers have been drafted in the number one overall spot. 5 since 1983.
And now I'm trying to name them in my head, and I think
one of them is John Elway, so that was 1983. Yeah. But think about that. You have the entire board open to you. Every college football player. You would think the percentage would be higher than that. Now, there's 1 or 2 that are probably slated for Hall of Fame, but when you think about the fact that you're talking about, you have the number one pick, it's right there in front of you. So what does that mean then? Does that just mean some organizations are always just doomed to be bad because they make bad decisions? Because if you have the entire board and you're swinging and missing at Hall of Famers as an NFL GM time and time again, it does beg the question: what's the process here?
You would have to see the records, who is GM for which teams, whatever. But I think the overall discussion is, and I heard an analyst say this, and it kind of took me aback for just a second. He's not going to call anyone can't miss anymore. Not going to say how this society is about what we have is better than what they had. It's the LeBron James, Michael Jordan conversation. And they don't even mention Larry Bird. So I understand, but there's a lot of hype in this generation, a lot of hype in this day and age. So what you say is that since 83, only 5 Hall of Famers were drafted in that regard. It does say a lot, and it's only going to get worse as pools become diluted, as we become far more populous. Keep that in mind. All right, let's stay in the Central, the NFL Norris here. We talked about Chicago. It's not going to be an easy turn for them because Minnesota got better as well, huh?
They did, and they didn't have to move the draft capital to do it. And everybody thought they would have to move up to 4 or even 5, leapfrog the Giants. Like, they didn't have to do it. Minnesota ended up taking J.J. McCarthy, who was the quarterback they wanted to take. They got him. And I heard there was a lot of buzz that people wanted to move up to take Drake May. The Patriots were not doing that. They weren't blown away by any of those offers. But J.J. McCarthy is interesting because he does go into a spot where he does not have to start right away with Sam Darnold there. He does not have to, but he should sooner than later. And when he does, he's got Jordan Addison, he's got Justin Jefferson, and now they have the blueprint of the young quarterback that's going to save you cap space and you can spend elsewhere. And that is huge for an organization in the NFL right now. So getting McCarthy, getting Dallas Turner at 17, they made the most of those 2 picks. They got an edge rusher. They got their quarterback. The Arizona Cardinals, I thought, were a big winner too. Marvin Harrison Jr. is, I won't say can't miss, but is, because Matt will yell at me, but as close as you could possibly get. The guy does everything right. He is, again, Hall of Fame bloodlines we're talking about, and a little bit more size than his daddy had. So is a good spot for him. Darius Robinson, the edge rusher from Missouri, was a good pick. Max Melton from Rutgers, our local boy here at corner in Jersey. Trey Benson. Look, James Conner is not long for this league probably at the running back position. Trey Benson's going to get an opportunity. I'd be drafting him in the later part of drafts in 2024. Last 6 weeks of the season will be good for Trey Benson and then Isaiah Adams, offensive lineman. So again, you don't usually say this, but Arizona had a good draft and they certainly had enough picks. They deserve that. And then last but not least, it's the Eagles. Howie Roseman every single year just sits back just like John Harbaugh does and just takes BPA. And Quinyon Mitchell fell way down where he should have. They needed corner in the worst way. It was a huge deficit for this team last year. They took it. And then Cooper DeJean, who was arguably the second best corner in this class, they got him too at 40. And it's just like, you can't let the Eagles keep doing this stuff. Jalex Hunt is a raw prospect as far as a pass rusher goes, but certainly somebody that would not shock me if he ends up becoming a very good one. So the Eagles, once again, the rest of the league's got to change things. They can't keep letting the Eagles do this because they have been very successful just letting the value fall to them and taking advantage of that. We return. Not every moment was good, but instead of doing losers, let's do a little WTF.
So I turned it off. I got my sweat done, and I'm leaving. I'm taking my money. I'm going home, and I don't want to talk to you for the rest.
Oh, yes!
There it is.
6-3. Cast the over. The over is hit. The Padres are our heroes.
That's how we end the show. That's how we end the show.
Oh, well, let's just sign off. Let's just call it a show.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid.
Quotes coming out about Embiid. Oh, he's a warrior. You'll never get him off the court. You're just telling me he's an injury. He's one slip and fall away from not seeing him anymore in this series.
I would have sat him because there was only 1 day between the two games. It's 2 days between games 2 and games 3, and it's 2 days between games 3 and game 4.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Great.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports today. Matt and Joe with you here, giving you everything you need to dominate. And I'm excited because I understand that Derrick Brown has just entered our studio on the other side of the break. Derrick and Joe are going to break down absolutely everything. But before that happens, it is time now for the What the segment of the show. Is some of these picks, and yes, I censored myself so that Joe doesn't have to do it. Some of these picks left even the most profound pundits scratching their heads and saying, what the, Joe, there's a few handful of picks here that made you say, what's up?
Yeah, that's good. We're going to make some extra work for our production team today. You know, we always do the draft winners and losers. We just did the winners, but I think the losers, that's boring. Let's not bore everybody. It's Sunday morning. Let's shake everybody and wake them up a little bit. There's moments that made me say, WTF, bro. Like, I just don't understand it. It's not so much like the player they're taking. It's more when they're taking the player that just makes very little sense to me. Now, as a Patriots fan, I got lulled into a false sense of security. Bill Belichick's not there anymore. We didn't trade back. We actually had a top 5 overall pick, top 3, and we took a franchise quarterback. We didn't muck around. We actually did what we were supposed to do. And I thought to myself, oh, good. The page is turned. We are in a real modern day 2024 NFL. And then the second round happened for the New England Patriots. And the second round, all of a sudden, I started to go, oh my God, WTF. Jalen Polk was the wide receiver selected from Washington. Now, I'm not saying Jalen Polk can't be a good wide receiver, but this is a guy that was ranked, like, say, on Thor Nystrom's board, my colleague at Fantasy Pros, in the hundreds. And we took him at 37. So if you love Jalen Polk, that's fine. You think he's great for your offense, that's fine. How do you take him with Ladd McConkey still on the board? You could have had your cake and eaten it too, and I want to get diabetes if I'm the Patriots. I need more wide receivers than you could possibly fathom on that team because they don't have any right now. KJ Osborne is not the long-term answer here, nor is anybody else that they have. They have, for years, lacked true talent at the wide receiver position, game-changing talent. McConkey could be one of those guys. He fits into the kind of scheme that the New England Patriots historically want to run. This made me scratch my head. I don't understand it. Again, I'm not knocking Polk. I'm not trying to say he can't be something good in the NFL. And then my friend Scott Bogman tried to tell me, it's okay. Don't worry about it because they ended up taking Baker. And that's, yeah, but they could have had all of them. You could have had all these guys. What are you doing here? So again, it's my frustrations here that you think things have turned the corner and you think it's going to be different. And then all of a sudden, we're back to Tyquan Thornton and N'Keal Harry and making bad decisions at wide receiver, which I thought was a Bill Belichick thing, but clearly it's not. Clearly it's an organizational deficit. And Matt, all I can say is WTF. We might have to make this a regular segment, by the way.
I'm having fun here, and this is great because, folks, if you think this is fun, Derrick Brown's on the other side. When these two get together, all hell's going to break loose. But now it's time for Joe to endear himself to the nation because Joe is going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys. Joseph?
Dallas Cowboy Nation, I feel your pain. Again, it's not that Maris Liafu is a bad player. He's a good player. He's a good linebacker at Notre Dame. I like him a lot. But what are you doing here? You need a running back. Is it the Rico Dowdle era? Is that what we're in? Is Royce Freeman, or God forbid, we're going back to Ezekiel Elliott? You had Marshawn Lloyd, who I know was Derrick Brown's #1 running back prospect on the board. You could have had him. Why did you pass? So I understood why they passed the first time. I said, okay, they're waiting. They're going to let the environment come to them. Running back is devalued now in the NFL draft. I get it. It's actually smart. But then it was right there for the taking. They didn't take Lloyd. They went linebacker instead. WTF, Cowboys fans. I don't have an answer for you. I wish I did. But the running back position, let me tell you, it's going to be rough there. And it just means, I guess the only positive is it's going to be another 2,000-yard receiving year potentially for CeeDee Lamb because they're not going to be able to run the football the way they need to.
All right, and with the final minute here, intriguing because this team was part of our winners list, and then they come up with a WTF pick. Take us home.
Yeah, Tip Ryman, tight end. Now, Arizona, I don't want to they told me don't get mad because it's just the tip, but I was mad about it, okay? And I'm mad about it because Tip Ryman was the second tight end off the board for a team that already has arguably one of the best young tight ends in Trey McBride in the league. So I was just talking about Arizona being a winner, and they did a great job. Arizona did a terrific job. This was the one spot in the draft where I just did not get it. What kind of 12 personnel are we running here? It makes no sense to me, especially the talent that was still available on the board in the 80s. It makes my head hurt. I don't understand it. WTF when it comes to these picks. We return. Maybe Derrick Brown will calm me down. I doubt it. But we're going to get his breakdown on the fantasy assets from the NFL draft that you need to know. Big Play 24.
So I turned it off. I got my sweat done, and I'm leaving. I'm taking my money. I'm going home, and I don't want to talk to you for the rest.
Oh, yes!
There it is.
6-3. Catch the over. The over is hit. The Padres are our heroes.
That's how we end the show. That's how we end the show.
Oh, well, let's just sign off. Let's just call it a show.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid.
Quotes coming out about Embiid. Oh, he's a warrior. You'll never get him off the court. You're just telling me he's an injury. He's one slip and fall away from not seeing him anymore in this series.
I would have sat him because there was only one day between the two games. It's 2 days between games 2 and games 3, and it's 2 days between games 3 and game 4.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Welcome back, everybody, to Fantasy Sports Today here on Sports Grid. And it's time to crack open the head of Derrick Brown and look inside and see what glorious football knowledge awaits all of us. The NFL draft is in the books, which means only one thing. It's time to talk about the fantasy ramifications. And D-Bro, Derrick Brown, the king of bros from Fantasy Pros, is here to help us do just that. Derrick, we spent 10 and a half quality hours together on Thursday and Friday, a little bit of a break yesterday, and now it's back to business for us. Your general feeling after this draft is now in the books. How did you feel when the dust cleared? Because I always feel like that one day where you have to kind of sit back and look a little bit can be very cathartic.
I'm still kind of simmering, Joe. I'm like a fine wine, a great bourbon. I'm still kind of marinating on all this and, trying to decipher draft grades, where I sit on all these picks. But I'll tell you one thing. The one thing that was not great bourbon was not fantastic. We don't want this on any kind of shelf, much less the top shelf. Some of these picks, man, like the Michael Penix pick, which people have talked about for days. Can we also talk about, you mentioned this in the last thing. What is Arizona doing with Tip Ryman? Like, do we not already have enough tight ends in Arizona? The Jets feel like they need a ton of running backs. I still feel like I'm trying to process all of it, Joe, but it was a wild draft.
Yeah, and it's a shame because the Cardinals, I think, had a great draft. That was the one outlier where I just don't understand. What are you doing there? I don't know. Maybe they got auto-picked. That happens to a lot of people sometimes. You have your draft board. Next thing you know, oh, no! Oh, the Arizona Cardinals got auto-picked. But let's get to the quarterbacks here because this is what's going to have an impact, not just on the value of these guys in fantasy. Look, none of these guys are probably QB1s necessarily this year. So in single quarterback leagues, these are more guys to draft and stash with the way quarterback injuries have hit us. But in Superflex, these guys are going to be ones to talk about. But maybe even more importantly, what our expectations are for the players attached to them. So Caleb Williams, Chicago Bears, rookie quarterback with two veterans, DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. How does this affect their value now that they are working with a young quarterback here in Caleb Williams in 2024?
I think all the targets are going to get spread out in this passing tree, Joe. I mean, it's really good for Caleb. I mean, he's surrounded by just a laundry list of skill players. But like we're talking about, who's the guy that you want in fantasy? Is it Rome Odunze? Probably not. Is it Keenan Allen? I mean, didn't show any fall off last year, but is he going to be able to separate himself enough from DJ Moore? And is he going to be the consistent target earner in the number one? I think that we're looking at a situation where the number one, kind of like everybody doesn't know what to do in Houston. I don't know what to do in Chicago, man. Similar situation. 3 extremely and supremely talented wide receivers. I think it's going to just be a roulette wheel, man. Like a guy, or at least a situation where I probably want more exposure to these guys in not management formats like best ball and things like that versus, okay, now I've got to set a lineup every single week. Who am I going with? How do I feel good about that?
I think you have to leave those guys in there. But I made the analogy that just like Jackson Smith and Jigba last year, Rome Odunze is probably going to be a persona non grata unless there's an injury.
Agreed.
If there's an injury happening, then that will open up a spot for him. But other than that, I think 2024, you got to temper your expectations. Jaden Daniels is going to have a lot of expectations for the Commanders. Now, Daniels is a player that certainly can make some plays with his legs. He's going to have Terry McLaurin. We hope he'll have Austin Eckler. We'll see what kind of health he is going to be in. But Daniels, again, is this the guy that might be the sneaky superflex quarterback in 2024 because of that rushing equity he brings?
Oh, absolutely. And he's already my highest. Like, I was assuming, and you know this already, since we've had billions of conversations before the NFL draft, I was already assuming and had pigeonholed the Washington Commanders to be the team that selected him way back in February. It just seemed like a lock and basically was a lock kind of fit. Cliff Kingsbury's offense is a perfect marriage for Jaden Daniels, both with the play action rates and the deep ball rates. I mean, Jaden Daniels doesn't matter whatever metric you look at last year, he was top shelf as far as deep ball passing. And I think that translates obviously to the NFL and this offensive system. So Jaden Daniels right now, before the NFL draft, assuming the placement, he was going to Washington. I had him as my QB 10 in fantasy. He's still my QB 10. And the other part about that is there is more meat on the bone and there is ceiling to be had there, Joey. I mean, what have we seen just out of, if you make the loose and lazy comparison to Justin Fields, QB 9, QB 5 in fantasy points per game over the last 2 years. So that's pretty much close to the floor for Jaden Daniels is QB 12. And everything else, the ceiling can be impacted and go on top of that because we saw them add a ton of skill guys. Like now we have Ben Sinnott in the room. Now, yes, we have Terry McLaurin still and Jahan Dotson and Luke McCaffrey, who can play the slot and be a solid underneath weapon. The Commanders really crushed this draft.
So if you're in a dynasty rookie draft, right? Let's say it's Superflex because most of them are. What's the first 3 picks off the board in your opinion in terms of value? Is it Williams, Daniels, some combination, and then who's number 3? Is it Drake May or is it Marvin Harrison for you?
And this is when I
know
was
I'm
making out
asking
my
in a
top
vacuum,
50.
but still.
No, you're right. Like the hard part about that is it's hard because I think in this class and with the landing spots, it is contextual to your roster in Dynasty. Are you set at quarterback? Do you not need quarterbacks? Do you need wide receivers? I mean, wide receivers are Dynasty gold. We know everybody loves them. We don't like running backs because of the short shelf life. And I think you can make a really good conversation starter for all of these guys. For me in Superflex formats, I'm probably just going to lean on the quarterback. So Jaden Daniels is probably going to end up being my 101. And people could have a problem with that. I don't trade for quarterbacks in Dynasty, Joey. You know this. I draft them.
Mm-hmm.
So if I could draft Jaden Daniels and there's always the ebbs and flows with wide receivers in Dynasty. So you're going to have opportunities later in the season, like you're talking about with Roma Dunze. With this landing spot, people are not going to firmly bake in enough that Keenan Allen is probably gone after this year. Like he's a street free agent after 2024. So wheels up for him in 2025, but that's going to depress his value. So for me, it's Jaden Daniels, and then it becomes very roster specific. In a vacuum, I'm going Jaden Daniels. I'm going Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors. And then it's pick your flavor of quarterback. So people could be surprised I'm not mentioning Caleb Williams here. I like Caleb Williams a lot, but I think he's in a similar tier as J.J. McCarthy. People still don't want to hear that, but this was the plum landing spot we wanted, Joey. Minnesota? Yeah. Seriously? T.J. Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. And I put this out on X, and I said, look, if you just look at what the Minnesota quarterbacks did in general last year, man, like we were looking at in 8 of the starts that Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins got, 63% of the time they were QB1s in fantasy. That would have been the 6th highest rate, right ahead of Justin Herbert last year in fantasy. So I'm not knocking J.J. McCarthy down the board, but people are surprised that I'm not as high on everybody or on Caleb Williams as everybody else.
What about Drake May? Because that's the guy that kind of falls in this middle range here where you kind of have to have a leap of faith. Look, size-wise, he's your prototypical NFL quarterback. I think the upside is Carson Palmer we talked about. The downside is Carson Wentz. I think he's got a little bit more of that swagger than people realize, which I do like about him. And I think he's going to need that in New England. It's a tough situation, though, because it's not an offensive-minded head coach, and it's not a great group of weapons he has to work with. So is this just more of a long-term patience thing when it comes to Drake May?
I think you're gonna have to preach patience because I don't even think he starts week 1. I think they ease him in, and a lot of evaluators, and myself included, and a ton of other people in the NFL community have said Drake May needs to sit. There are things in his game he needs to work on, and if we look at Alex Van Pelt, and I wrote this up on Fantasy Pros, in his time in Cleveland, 6th in neutral rushing rate. So even if May starts, they're going to protect him and run the ever-loving hell out of the ball. They're going to do that, and that's going to lead to less volume for May.
All right, so if we think that he doesn't start necessarily to begin the year, what about J.J. McCarthy? Because J.J. McCarthy has Sam Darnold there to kind of keep the spot warm. So if you had to put, let's say, an over-under, let's put it at 6.5 weeks, will you over or under that for McCarthy?
4 to 6 weeks is basically where I'm at, and I think I'll take the under because I think Sam Darnold's going to do Sam Darnold things, and I think we're going to see JJ sooner than people expect.
All right. Well, we're going to have Derrick Brown do more Derrick Brown things when we come back because we're going to talk about some wide receivers that aren't named Harrison and Malik Neighbors and Roma Dunze because we've talked about them a lot leading up to the draft. But what about some of the other players that have fallen into some other spots? What does that mean for fantasy? We'll tell you.
So I turned it off. I got my sweat done, and I'm leaving. I'm taking my money. I'm going home, and I don't want to talk to you the rest.
Oh, yes!
There it is.
6-3. Cast the over. The over is hit. The Padres are our heroes.
That's how we end the show. That's how we end the show.
Oh, well, let's just sign off. Let's just call it a show.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid.
Quotes coming out about Embiid. Oh, he's a warrior. You'll never get him off the court. You're just telling me he's an injury. He's one slip and fall away from not seeing him anymore in this series.
I would have sat him because there was only 1 day between the two games. It's 2 days between games 2 and games 3, and it's 2 days between games 3 and game 4.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
All right, let's jump in head first here to some wide receivers that maybe have not gotten enough publicity, but from a fantasy perspective, they might get opportunity. And let's start with Brian Thomas of the Jacksonville Jaguars now. So the Jags moved back a little bit, got a wide receiver, Brian Thomas, the complement to Malik Neighbors at LSU, played with Jaden Daniels. Now he gets to play with Trevor Lawrence. So your expectations for him in 2024 in redraft leagues and also in dynasty keeper formats, what can Brian Thomas, Derrick Brown, give to this Jaguars offense?
I was a little bit curious about this fit, Joey, to be honest. Looking at Brian Thomas Jr.'s skill set, and we categorically look at him as a field stretcher, and the marriage of this depth chart between Brian Thomas Jr. and especially Gabe Davis. So I look at Brian Thomas Jr. in 2024 as a wide receiver 3/4, and people could be surprised by that because saying Jacksonville put a lot of respect on his name with the draft capital. But if you look at the overall complexion of this passing attack, his landing spot there and him going there actually makes me the highest on Christian Kirk. I'm willing to bump him up the board because what we saw out of him last year, wide receiver 19, was a full-time starter in this offense in fantasy. So with Brian Thomas Jr., it's not that I don't like the player, but we've talked about the limitations of this game, or at least we need to see an expanded route tree in the NFL because we didn't see it that at LSU. It was go balls, it was hitches, it was slot fades, and that was basically it. And projecting that to the NFL, he's going to have weeks. I'm not telling people that he won't, but are you going to feel comfortable in putting him into your lineup every single week? That I'm not so sure about.
All right, what about the next guy on our list, which was a big head scratcher, I know, when we were doing this draft together, where somehow the Buffalo Bills decided to just hand the Chiefs the fastest guy in the draft in Xavier Worthy from Texas. So this was very puzzling that Buffalo was willing to help the Chiefs out here for this one. But regardless, the Chiefs did get that guy who has got that Tyreek Hill level kind of speed. We'll see what happens with Rashee Rice. More to come on that. But what do you think of this Xavier Worthy pick here for the Kansas City Chiefs and for Patrick Mahomes, who struggled last year in the first half to get anything out of that wide receiver core? How important is Worthy going to be?
I think he's going to be the linchpin of the offense, and this is not taking anything away from Rashee Rice or Travis Kelce, but when do we see Rashee Rice back on the field? We don't know. It's up in the air. Travis Kelce, we saw take a step back last year. I'm not telling you that he's a schmo, that he's not good at football and things like that, but is he unequivocally the number one tight end of the NFL without question anymore? That's up for debate. I think this all points back to Xavier Worthy and Marquise Hollywood Brown. Again, he is not the picture of health. Since he's been in the NFL, even before that, It's been foot injury after foot injury after foot injury. We can't even assume that he's going to be able to make it through a full NFL season healthy. He wasn't able to do it last year, and I'm not trying to project injuries upon any player, but it is a concern. And looking at Xavier Worthy, where he fits in this passing attack, he could stretch the defense. He can win underneath. I mean, Joey, you know my thoughts on him. I've been higher on him the entire time. Like, he was my wide receiver wide receiver 5 in this class before the KC landing spot. Now he's my wide receiver 4 in the class because he can threaten a defense at all 3 levels. And the conversation, I've said it a ton of times, but it's absolutely true. He can threaten a defense, and the conversation starts with him about his speed when it really should start about his route running.
Well, the conversation for the 49ers is an interesting one because now all of a sudden they've got a very packed wide receiver room. Brandon Ayuk didn't get traded. Deebo Samuel didn't get traded, at least not yet. But Ricky Pearsall did get drafted. So the wide receiver out of Florida, who I know you and Thor were both very high on, actually, he snuck in to the end of the first round. So what happens now? Because he's not going to get opportunities over those 2 veterans. So is this more of a sit and wait kind of scenario? Or do you think maybe there will be a trade sooner than later? I know that first round pick they were looking for Ayuk, that was never going to happen.
Yeah, I think we still could have a trade in the works, and was no team willing to pony up the pick. The closer we get to training camp season and things like that, does a team decide to move? Because we didn't get all those moving dominoes, Joe. We talked about, okay, does Deebo move in the draft? Didn't happen. Does Brandon Ayuk move in the draft? Didn't happen. Does T. Higgins move in the draft? Didn't happen. So all of these moving parts or pieces that we were expecting, none of them happened. So right now, yeah, Ricky Pearsall is on the outside looking in because we know the studs that carry this offense. It's Christian McCaffrey, it's George Kittle, it's Brandon Ayuk, and Deebo Samuel. And so until one of those dominoes falls, yeah, he's going to be on the outside looking in. But the thing that I will point out here is we could see a lot more 11 personnel from San Francisco if they do keep all these guys. So while Juwan Jennings has not been a full-time player, it's Juwan Jennings. We're comparing Juwan Jennings versus Ricky Pearsall Jr., who was just drafted in the first round. Skill sets are not even close to comparable. I love Pearsall, and I think this is going to make him a fantastic value in Dynasty rookie drafts because people are going to look at that situation. But just you and I know this, Joe. Situations change so drastically and so quickly in the NFL that really you want to be out ahead of the curve. Pearsall is not just the present, he's the future.
Ladd McConkey, I'm still frustrated, is not a Patriot. Instead, he lands with the Chargers. I'm never going to get over this one. Wide receiver from Georgia. Look, this is an opportunity, though, because the deck is now cleared for this guy. So, wheels up for Ladd McConkey, D-Bro?
Oh, it is. And people are going to look, all the tired Jim Harbaugh jokes are going to hit the timeline every single day until we get kickoff the NFL season. And people are like, he's going to run the ball 30 times a game, 50 times a game. They might not pass it at all. They're going to throw the ball. They're going to throw. And I'm not telling you they're going to be top 5 in neutral passing rate, but they're going to throw the ball, people. Like, even if they're bottom of the league, they're going to throw the ball 500 times this NFL season. You're telling me in the depth chart of Quentin Johnston, which the Chargers said, oh, it doesn't matter that we invested a first-round pick in you last year. Pew! You're going down the depth chart. Ladd McConkey is going to be the target leader this year, and he's going to have weeks. Now, the question is, how high is the ceiling because of that, the passing volume? That's fair to question. We can't question the talent. So I will be investing in Ladd McConkey because I think people are going to get out over their skis and they're going to say, well, but the Georgia's going to run it all the time. There's no way they're going to pass the ball. And that's going to make him a value.
I'm curious to see if he can get anything out of Quentin Johnston. I'm curious because I think if anybody can, Harbaugh
I don't know.
Like, look, man, I think you go back and look at that college tape and you say, what did he do well? Let's get back to that. Let's get back to some screens, get him out there in space a little bit, keep it simple for the kid, maybe some productivity. We come back, I'll look at the running backs. Remember when they used to be important in the NFL? We'll tell you fancy what it means right after this.
So I turned it off. I got my sweat done, and I'm leaving. I'm taking my money. I'm going home, and I don't want to talk to you the rest.
Oh, yes!
There it is.
6-3. Cast the over. The over is hit. The Padres are our heroes.
That's how we end the
Oh,
show.
well, let's just sign off. Let's just call it a show.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid.
Quotes coming out about Embiid. Oh, he's a warrior. You'll never get him off the court. You're just telling me he's an injury. He's one slip and fall away from not seeing him anymore in this series.
I would have sat him because there was only one day between the two games. It's 2 days between games 2 and games 3, and it's 2 days between games 3 and game 4.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Great.
All right, let's dive into the running backs here. The big running back name that went first maybe was a little unexpected because of the injuries that are basically kind of looming here with Jonathan Brooks, but still, the talent for Jonathan Brooks from Texas, off the chart. Carolina Panthers end up taking him at 46. Debro, again, a lot of this has to do with the health, but I keep saying this is the perfect guy to take with a late pick in 2024 drafts because it's more about the last 6 weeks of the season that I'm interested in Jonathan Brooks in the first 6. I can patch it together for the first few weeks, take some middling running back guys, but if Brooks takes over that job at some point, because the guys ahead of him are just place fillers, Brooks could be one of these guys that carries you into the playoffs. Your thoughts on this selection by the Panthers?
We're riding in the same party wagon, Joe. I'm all in on Jonathan Brooks. I love the call right there. And I said this before the NFL draft that the Carolina Panthers were the sneakiest, one of the best spots for a running back to land. And because if you look at the situation, this coaching staff and the new front office didn't pay, well, yes, outside of Dave Tepper, didn't pay Miles Sanders. They have no allegiances to him. They didn't coach Chuba Hubbard last year, and he was the guy that was starting all year. Jonathan Brooks enters this, and we've seen out of Dave Canellis every stop he's been at, Seattle and last year in Tampa, he wants a guy that he can hand the ball to and give touches to 15 to 20 times a game. Jonathan Brooks, I'm not telling you that he starts out week 1 like that, but can he finish the season like that? It's absolutely possible because, Joey, we're old enough to remember when people shaded Breece Hall last year and said, well, he's coming off the ACL. Does the same thing happen to Jonathan Brooks this year?
Well, but also the rookie running backs has been such a strong trend in the NFL the last 5 years where even the ones that we're excited about, they typically start to go off later. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs, how frustrated were people with Jahmyr Gibbs in September into October? Oh my God, should I drop this guy? He's not doing, like, relax. Rookie running backs are going to slowly get up to speed. And then Jahmyr Gibbs was a guy that you couldn't live without by the last 8 weeks of the season. So again, patience here when it comes to these guys. Another guy too to talk about, the Cardinals selected Trey Benson from Florida State. Now, Benson, another one of these guys that has bell cow ability. The guy in front of him is James Conner. James Conner, an older running back, probably towards the end here. He has had a host of injuries throughout his career, but he's had a pretty solid career, all things being said. Now we're getting to a point where Benson, I feel the same way about this kid. If I miss out on Brooks, then maybe I want Benson, or maybe I'm getting both of these guys and stashing them on my bench because I feel like over time, eventually the younger running back's going to get the opportunity. What do you think about the selection here for the Cardinals? Did they hit a home run here?
I think they did. I mean, what we're seeing out of the Arizona Cardinals is they have done a fantastic job of remaking this entire roster over the last 2 drafts. whether it's both sides of the ball, and looking at, they're playing 4D chess here. Yes, James Conner is still in house. He's an unrestricted free agent after this year. And we already know that, is it in the wheelhouse that James Conner can miss a game or two, maybe 3, maybe 4, because of his running style and because of, he's consistently dinged up every single year. Trey Benson, that's going to make him a fantastic value. When we look at Trey Benson, we talk about the home run speed, that 4.39 speed. So he doesn't need the 25 carries a game to sit here and put himself on the map in Fantasy Weekly.
All right, so the other running backs that got drafted here might be in kind of a spot like Marshawn Lloyd goes, where he's behind in the Packers situation there, a little bit behind Josh Jacobs, A.J. Dillon still on the roster, and Blake Corum behind Kyron Williams, who was everybody's fantasy darling last year. So when it comes to these guys who got drafted that have other running backs apparently ahead of them on the depth chart, how do you treat them going forward in 2024? And how do you treat guys like Lloyd and Corum going forward in dynasty leagues?
I think you look at each situation and you look at the skill sets they've been paired with. Specifically with Blake Corum, Kyron Williams, I think, is still going to be the lead back in this offense. I think this is the Rams telling us that this 90-95% snap share that he absorbed last year, they don't want him to do that. So people are going to worry about this. And I'm like, look, you just invested more in Kyron Williams. And people are so worried about Blake Corum because Blake Corum, the pass game utility has never been there, even at Michigan. And I don't think we see that in the NFL. So if this makes Kyron Williams more of a value, I'm so here for it, Joey.
Check out all of Derrick Brown's work over at fantasypros.com and on our YouTube channel at Fantasy Pros. Him, myself, and Thor Nitro are going to be giving all the grades out this week for all of the teams. Those are going to be must-watch programs as well. D-Bro, thanks for joining us after a very, very long NFL draft week. Go get some rest, buddy. That's what you need. A little R&R for your brain. Let it breathe, as you said, like that good scotch. I want to thank all of our production team today. A great job here on FST, as always on Sunday. Stay on the grid for more incredible content all day long. More draft fallout sure to come. And, of course, I want to say thanks to my co-host, Matt Stryker. As always, that'll do it for us. But the story of the game goes on. We'll see you next time, kids. Enjoy your Sunday.
It's a season-long DFS.
Miami is going to win, and you should.
Have I told you about it?
Your gut also said NFC selfies would only go up
basically, like, because I actually have grown very tired of like normal fantasy football. The whole every league you're in is who drafted the MVP in the 7th round, and that's decided the entire league.
So
like I hate it.
Trust your head. It's smarter to.
And then like people always do drop off and shit like that. So it's 17 weeks.
Swung it easy at 3/4 golf swings, and he pretty much hit his number all the time. Dude, but when he hit something full, he hit it 20 yards over the greens at times. He's like, what are you doing?
He's just smiley, happy, and a freakish athlete golf robot that's going to be right there winning majors for the next 10-plus years. It's amazing.
Did you say he was smiling or smiley?
Only on SportsGrid.
They're still the best. They're still the champs. Everyone wants to crown the Celtics the champions, but that's not the way it works. They got to beat them. And, they got to get through the East, which isn't going to be fun to begin with. Everyone thinks it's so automatic.
If it's just Boris is kind of losing his power, if whatever his tactics have been, yeah, move on.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
We talked about the Ohtani story. This interpreter, Ipe, clearly was a problem gambler. I mean, he would be identified as that and beyond. Now, there are a lot of others that are out there.
The timing didn't seem great. It seemed slightly tone deaf in terms of, maybe now isn't the time to say it. But the sentiment itself, you have to agree with. There's only so much a sports betting company can do.